This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm Juliette Helmke, part of the team who brings you all of the news and insights that you love on smart property investment. Today, we're looking at a little discussed but very important part of the property equation, and that's how property is handled when it becomes involved in the legal process. Now, I know at first this might sound like a rare occurrence if you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, but folks, it is all too common, and most frequently that's because of partnership breakdowns that see co-owners, such as spouses, split up and divide their assets. So here at SPI, we are very lucky to have some legal experts as colleagues in the team that publishes Lawyers Weekly. They have recently aired an engaging discussion with property valuer Gareth Woodham, which we are bringing to you here, and he discusses the role that property valuation can play in legal disputes, the types of disputes he's often called in for, and so much more. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Lawyers Weekly Show for an in-depth look at the issues facing the legal profession.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Lawyers Weekly Show. My name's Jerome Dorasami and I'm coming to you today from Camaragal Land in Sydney. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Gareth Woodham, who is the Principal Valuer at Augmen Consulting. Gareth, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jerome. Pleasure to be here.
Gareth is a certified practicing valuer. I'm reading from his website here. He's been conducting property valuations across Sydney and Melbourne for nearly 2 decades. He's conducted valuations for major banks, financial institutions, lawyers, and accountants for a number of different reasons, including mortgage security, statutory assessment, mercantile recovery, and family law. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about what his work looks like, how and why he does valuations for lawyers and for family law specifically, and how best lawyers can be working with valuers like Gareth, particularly given what's happening in the market right now. Gareth, I'm really interested to learn a bit more about this work that you do. And to start off, I might ask you how you got into this line of work.
Thanks, Jerome. So basically, I got into it when I finished high school last century. I started a degree at UTS, so University of Technology, and I started a Bachelor of Land Economics, and it's a property degree. It's a very broad property degree, and I made a good cohort of friends and colleagues there, and we all went into different areas of property. Myself, I went into specifically into property valuation, and I've been working in property valuation ever since. I registered in 1999, so it's nearly 25 years now, so I might have to update my website.
Oh, okay.
And I've been valuing and buying. I got my real estate license some years ago, so I've been buying property as well for people, but mainly the property valuation across New South Wales and Victoria. I've also bought property around the country, but I'm not licensed to value property in jurisdictions such as Queensland and WA just yet. They've got different licensing requirements, but yeah. Valuing also property, residential property, commercial property, industrial property. 2 weeks ago, I was out on a farm just between Canberra and Goulburn. I was looking at a dilapidated eastern suburbs house that sold for $9 million the day before that. I've got a contaminated factory up on the Central Coast. I've got a contaminated development site, waterfront development site up on the Hawkesbury River. It's amazing, all the different things. And like you said, it's for a range of purposes. A lot is for family law, where I get instructed when parties are separating, and also just straight litigation matters. So typically Supreme Court, but also they can be a bit more property focused in Land and Environment Court and CAT.
Well, I'm definitely keen to learn more about some of the work you do in litigation and in family law, but I'm curious to know a bit more about what the day-to-day looks like. I'm imagining it's not quite as simple as you rock up at a property and say, yep, this is worth $1 million or whatever. There must be 1,001 different factors to take into account, like environmental, demographic, just to name two there. But yeah, there must be so many considerations in coming to a valuation.
Well, they say that Sydney siders are addicted to property. So you can imagine I'm probably a fairly popular guy at a barbecue and everyone goes, oh, well, what do you reckon my house is worth? And of course I'm good, but I'm not that good. So I do like to say that you never like to have the opinion of what something's worth until you've really done all of your research and you've worked towards that, because particularly when you're doing it and I do take great care, particularly I do care on all my work, but I'm very conscious when people are separating, this is a pinnacle moment in their life and they'll be moving forward, and the two people moving forwards in completely different directions. And it's very important that they get the right outcome. Now, it's not for me to be the arbiter of what is fair. That's for the court to decide. But I need to make sure that when I've prepared a valuation, particularly for family law matters, it does address everything, and it is quite. It tells the story as to why that property is being valued at that amount for that reason. And typically, it is residential property, but now and then, commercial properties are included in the mix as well in those matters.
When you're valuing a property, do you have a black and white checklist of things to tick off, or is it case by case depending on what the property looks like?
There are checklist matters. So you need to go through your checklist on the land size and the frontage and the zoning and such, and you sort of walk through the house. But it's a lot of the best way I describe, and I think we're speaking about residential property first. The best way I describe it to people when you're valuing those type of properties is you look at all the properties nearby that have sold recently. And if you were to put them in a line from the cheapest to the most expensive, and so that's an exercise first to work out how to see them like that. And then you've got a difficult bit is to put the property that you're valuing somewhere within that line. Where does it position between the $1.8 million and the $4.6 million? Where does it sit between all those sales that have occurred in the last sort of 3 to 6 months? And that's the simplest way I can describe it. But there is a whole multi-dimensional matrix of things that you consider when you're making a comparison. And that's how you value residential property, is on comparison, whether something's superior, inferior, or comparable to the property that you're assessing. And there's so many aspects, as in like the land size, the aspect, the location in the street, the views, and then you've got the size of the house, the condition of the improvements, any ancillary improvements. The side of the road can be an impact to determine what school zone you're in and such. So there's all these little things that can have small or large influence in different areas. Some things like garaging can have a much more impactful outcome on the value of a property as to other areas, and so many other things. So it's all about assessing that in relative to the market that you're assessing it in.
And with that multi-dimensional matrix you mentioned, do you also have to kind of think about what's happened in the past versus what might happen in the future? Like, for example, if you're looking at a beach house, waterfront property, you might say, well, in years gone by, waterfront properties have been worth a lot, but if the sea levels keep rising, then the sand gets swept away, then maybe this isn't going to be worth as much. Do you kind of have to balance the past and the future?
Yeah, it is interesting because you've got to be careful, because a property valuer is never able to predict what a property is worth tomorrow. Yeah. So you can't say that today it's worth $2 million and tomorrow it'll be worth 2.1 or 1.9. We're not permitted, because we don't have any evidence of what the future will bring. But what we can do is, yes, in those cases, you would indicate that there's a risk that there may be a potential climate change risk for that sort of property. And that does come up when you're looking at properties that are on the edge of flood zones and such, where they might not be flood impacted at the moment, but in 20 years' time, they may redraw those flood maps. And likewise, if you're on Wamberal Beach, or I know they've done a bit of work at Collaroy, but the northern beaches of Sydney, or particularly Wamberal Beach on the Central Coast, there are impacts of climate change that are being noted and addressed, and they're very expensive to deal with. And I don't know what the end solution is there, but they're all very expensive and concerning for people in those areas. But yeah, you do have to consider those things. Likewise, if there's a potential for a highway to be coming through, there is a risk that you would apply to that, so that there may be a risk to this valuation if that were to go ahead. And the risk is more likely if it's a maybe, like it's been gazetted for a road widening, but there's less likelihood of it happening, or it's the plans are in and they're just doing the final turnpike sort of suggestions now. Then that's all out for tender. Then you know that the risk is 99% that.
Yeah, we're chatting with Gareth Woodham, and we'll be back with more right after this.
Are you looking to invest for a big return, but are unsure which suburb is up and coming and guaranteed to give you the most bang for your buck? Smart Property Investment and Pure Property Investment have unveiled the Fast 50 report for 2025, identifying the suburbs backed by research that are giving investors the highest returns. Don't make any investing decisions until you read the free report. Visit smartpropertyinvestment.com.au to download the report.
So, Gareth, I want to hear a bit more about the work that you do in legal disputes. And as a starting point for that conversation, could you give us a bit of a lay of the land in, I guess, elaborating on, first of all, why someone like yourself comes in a legal dispute, but then also, I guess, what the state of affairs is right now in the market. Are you finding that you're really busy? Are things a bit quiet?
Where I come into play in a legal dispute, and particularly family law, I'm not a lawyer, but in my understanding is it's much better to settle things first. And so an important part of that process is to settle, as a matter of fact, what the property assets are worth, that they get the balance sheet squared away, and so then they can start bickering about what the percentages are on that. And so that saves a lot of heartache down the track and a lot of further expense. So that's quite important in that regard. And that's recognised by all parties and it can be achieved. And in those examples, it is achieved by both parties instructing the valuer under a joint instruction, so that it removes that bickering. It takes away the adversarial approach to, well, my expert says it's this much and my expert says it's that much. And so you can spend 2 days in court bickering about the value of the house before you're getting down to the crux of the matter is who's going to have the house and who's going to have the kids and so forth.
Just to clarify there, so you are like an independent expert as opposed to being engaged by one side or the other?
Correct. So in family law, the typical practice that is preferred by the courts is to have a joint appointed expert to provide one valuation. And unless a party has a very serious concern about that valuation, and then it'd be on to them to engage their own, that's called a shadow expert, to have a look over things and come to a substantially different conclusion. Those matters come up, but it is very rare. It is typically accepted that you're valuing a property and you're doing it without fear or favour. You're not sort of representing one side or the other. So I do joke that if both sides hate the outcome, then I think I got it pretty right. Because typically one person wants it high and one person wants it low. So it's about getting it as right as possible, and there's less argument about it, and there's a lot of money saved down the track.
Definitely. And are you finding that there is a lot more work that you're having to do in family law matters at the moment? There certainly has been an increase in the volume of family law matters since the age of COVID. So I'm wondering if there's been a flow-on impact for your workload.
It has definitely been. I don't put it down to just sitting still and waiting for the work to come in. It's the function of getting out there and soliciting for the work myself, but also the work is coming through and it is quite consistent. I still deal with matters where I value the property 2 or 3 times over the life of the matter. So they might be litigating for 2 or 3 years or more when they're getting real right into it. So that can be, I can't imagine how costly an exercise that might be for the belligerent couple. But those matters come up where I'll value I'll just walk through the same house again, make sure nothing's changed, or if it has, then you've got to document it and assess it based on the current market environments. So there can be big swings in the value of the property over that period when you have 20% price growth in some areas in a 12-month period. That could have a big impact on the pool of funds. But otherwise, I would say that there's a greater flow of work in family law and just general litigation work through a network of lawyers that I've been in touch with for many years.
Yeah, well, tell me a bit more about the general litigation matters that you work on.
When I say I do a lot of work for family law, people think, oh, that's a bit grim. Like you got people breaking up and that must be really, really nasty. But I must say that when I see some of the matters that are straight litigation where someone's done something wrong and someone's suing them for whatever reason and there's a property involved, and that's my interest, is just to work out what the property is worth. Some of them can be downright nasty and they've come at it with in real bad conscience and they've gone out to really do wrong by somebody, whether they're rescinding on contracts because it just doesn't suit them anymore, and it has a real knowing that they can get away with things to an extent, or diluting shares by a factor of 20,000 to rob another party in a business transaction, and seeing that people getting bundled up in litigation for hundreds of thousands of dollars for years, and it's all of that stress that they must go through and the costs that they must go through. So I do say that some of the great litigation, like just in its when it's a commercial litigation matter, can be quite nasty and very vindictive. And I don't know all of the facts of the matter, but you see those, when you've got estates that people have been sitting on for 80 or 90 years, and they pass away, and the family house in the eastern suburbs is now worth $20+ million, and there's the whole network of beneficiaries or alleged beneficiaries that have all got an interest or want a piece of an interest. The most amazing estate matter I ever dealt with, it was 26 years from the time that the gentleman passed until when it was finally settled. And to be, at the end, the property did sell for $21.5 million. It was a big factory and land in the western suburbs. But 2 of the 7 beneficiaries passed away in the period between when father died and the matter was completely settled. So that's how nasty people can get.
Yeah, it sounds as though the matters you work on in the legal space are both high stakes and high emotions.
Incredibly interesting, Jerome.
Yeah,
incredibly interesting. Yeah,
I bet. And so I'm wondering, how contentious the valuations get, and are they potentially getting more contentious in the current day and age?
The stakes are very high. So you have a 5% in one direction or the other on a $20 million property. There's a lot of money now. And so that could be the difference between someone retiring or working for another so many years, or it can be the difference between winning and losing for whatever it is. And so the stakes are much higher. And so I do understand why there would be less likelihood of just wiping your hands clean and walking away and starting afresh, because it's pretty hard to regroup from a $5 million wipeout or worse.
Yeah. Gareth, I've just got a couple more questions for you, which we'll get to on the other side of this.
Ready to supercharge your mornings while supporting work which improves the lives of Aussie heroes? This June, Invictus Australia is challenging everyone to rise at 6 a.m. and get active for 6 days by taking part in their 0600 challenge. Conquer your morning however you choose, a run, swim, or a group fitness class. Whatever gets you active and connected. Empower others to support your challenge and fundraise to help strengthen the lives of our Aussie heroes through sport, and help Invictus Australia combat the statistic that we lose 6 veterans to suicide a month. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.0600.com.au to sign up today and join the 0600 community.
So, Gareth, as an independent expert, coming in to these disputes, both the commercial litigation and also some of the family law matters, have you sort of found over the years that there are certain ways that those practitioners can best work with you? Even though, of course, you're not necessarily being engaged by one side or the other, it might be court appointed. Are there certain ways that the practitioners can ensure best practice?
Absolutely, the best way is very clear instructions. In litigation, interpretation is where everyone makes all their money. So if the instructions are very clear as to what the matter is involved in, if it is just to value a residential house, then just say that it's the value of the house and it's at the date that is inspected, that is fine. But if we're looking at in retrospectively, you want to make sure that the date that you're asking for, and you want to know, I don't need to know, but they want to make sure that they've chosen the right date for that, for whatever purposes that they're trying to achieve. If you're looking at as if scenarios. So some matters that I've been working on recently were in regards to dilapidated properties. So as if they had been maintained, or as if they had been repaired, or as if they had not been remediated. So in those matters, you need to be very clear on what your as if scenario looks like. So there can be no ambiguity about that, because it's my job to be unambiguous about my conclusion of value, and the best way to do that is to tell a story from the start to the finish, and that starts with the instructions and works through the property to get to the market to get to the value at the end, whether that be looking at recent sales or looking at rental evidence and calculating what capitalizing income for the property and analyzing the income from other similar commercial properties. It's about getting your information correct at the start so you can provide the best output for the client. Whether I'm working for both parties or working for one party, obviously I can't advise if I'm working for both parties, but if there can be some back and forth to make sure the instructions are exactly the direction they want to be framed when you're being instructed as a single expert.
Well, that seems like very simple and practical advice, and certainly that should be attainable by litigators and family lawyers. Do you find that sometimes these lawyers are falling short of meeting those standards?
Sometimes, but it depends if the stakes were high from the outset. They tend to be dotting all I's. And some firms do have the big pool of paralegals and junior lawyers and such that can draft all their very convoluted instructions that can extend for 7 or 10 pages. But other times it can be something quite simple. But usually it's sometimes the conversation can start with the phone instruction, but it does need to be, for any litigation matter, everything needs to be followed up with clear instructions in writing. Otherwise, that would be the first place that I would go. If I was critiquing another report, I would look at the instructions and see if they've answered the question.
Mm. And Gareth, looking ahead, are there any sort of market trends that you're identifying that might impact, I guess, the ways you look to work with lawyers?
I think the market is dynamic. As I mentioned earlier, everyone's addicted to talking about property, but it's not just residential property, industrial property. Everyone's surprised that because they think of industrial property as very boring and cheap. It's quite the opposite. And it's shown phenomenal price movements over the last few years. And so particularly matters that if you've got matters that are ongoing over time, then there will be cause to reset and have a look at if you need to know what the property is worth. If you're changing your date of settlement, then you need to reassess those things. I would always encourage people to, whatever they're doing, to settle it pretty sharply. I do see a lot of people tear up hundreds of thousands of dollars litigating matters, especially in smaller courts like NCAT, where I had appealing a land tax matter, and the poor gentleman spent a fortune. He won, but it was a completely Pyrrhic victory because he would have spent 3 times his land tax bill on litigation costs, which was very unfair. He had the means, but it was very unfair that it had to go that way. And yeah, that was the win.
Yeah. And Gareth, looking ahead, what excites you about your work in all of these kinds of legal disputes?
That you've never ever seen it all, and I'm sure I'm speaking with a lot of lawyers in that as well. You learn so much every day. I'm 50 years old now, and I'm learning far faster than I've learned when I was 20. There's so much involved, and there can be so much more once you start practicing in a certain area and you work with a certain network, and it opens completely different opportunities, and everything is a really great learning experience, and you just expand yourself. And it's that's the thing that keeps me going. I've been doing the same thing for 25 years, but it doesn't. It's getting. I would never call it boring.
Yes.
It was always very exciting, and my wife's very jealous of the work that I do because it is very interesting, and I'm quite passionate about it. I really enjoy it. It takes me all over the place. I travel a lot for work. I'm up the coast twice and down the coast once next week.
Yeah.
Well, twice down and once up next week. So there's property everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, well, of course.
It doesn't come to me.
Yeah. And just finally, Gareth, before I let you go, do you have any parting words of wisdom for lawyers listening to this for how best they can, view their interactions with valuers like yourself?
Well, I do like conversations. I'm a talker, in case you haven't noticed. So I do like talking to people and hearing what their situation is, and especially if it's one of those matters where they do need to they're aiming for a goal, which is when you're litigating, then you can discuss and talk with them and use my property expertise to help guide their instructions so we can achieve the best outcome for the client. But otherwise, communication is great because it really helps people understand what each other are doing, and you get to work for the best outcome for everyone that you're working with. I always find that's amazing.
Yeah. Gareth Woodham, thank you so much for your time.
No problem, Jerome. Thank you for yours too.
And thank you to the listener for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and review on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, as it'll help other lawyers discover and enjoy this show. And if you've got ideas for other episodes we can run, please get in touch at editor@lawyersweekly.com.au. You can also reach us on social media. See you again next time.
Listeners, thanks for tuning in to this latest edition of the Smart Property Investment Show. We hope you enjoyed this special episode courtesy of Lawyers Weekly. If you liked this episode, be sure to like or review us on whatever platform you do listen to podcasts on. Stay up to date with all the latest news over at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au and follow us on our socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. If If you have any questions or want to put forward someone who you think would make a great guest on a future episode of the Smart Property Investment Show, send us an email, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Until next time, stay well.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Feeling trapped by rising interest payments? Escape from mortgage prison with expert refinancing assistance from Finny. We have helped hundreds of borrowers break free from higher loan repayments by finding a more suitable loan. Our expert team can quickly assess your situation, and if there's a better lender available, we'll find it fast. Don't delay. Call today. Speak to a Finny mortgage specialist on 02 8866 2444 or visit our website at www.finny.com.au.